Okay, thanks people for coming today, for turning up. 30-minute methods. This is the second in this year's series. And we're really lucky today to have, let me show you, Runa Chakraborty Paunksnis. She's a member of the Faculty of Social Science, Arts and Humanities. I think I've got that right. At TDTU in Lithuania, Kaunas University of Technology. She's published on streaming video. She's got an article coming up in Inter-Asia Cultural Studies in June, but she's published on Dalit literature and on masculinity and the new Indian women. And she's going to talk to us today about streaming video on demand, content in India through a feminist lens. And thank you for joining us. Runa, welcome to TDTU. And
thank you.
I'll say if you speak for 20 or 25 at the most minutes, we'll then have time for a few questions, and that'll be our 30-minute methods. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your slides show.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, John, for inviting me to this series. And thank you all of you there who have come to listen to this talk, and also those who have joined online. Well, as you know, today I'm going to talk about the SVOD content, or subscription video on demand content in India through a feminist lens. Well, I think it's a kind of a coincidence that I'm giving this talk today, a day before what is known as International Women's Day. Well, I don't know how many people actually critically examine feminism or study feminism, but words and phrases like agency or empowerment or independent women, these words and phrases are very much in circulation these days. Often we get to hear these terms, and in fact, these words and phrases become tremendously popular around 8th March. Well, actually, this is this phenomenon of visibility of these so-called quote-unquote feminist terms and images that has been at the root of my research, which I'm going to share with you today. Just a slice of it, basically. This in 25 minutes or 20 minutes, it's not really possible to say everything. Well, just to give you a heads up, like how I came to this particular research method or thought of doing research on this. For past few years, I have noticed that there has been an interesting turn in the SVOD content in India as far as representation of women is concerned. So what do we mean by this interesting turn? The SVOD space, or let's say the streaming platform, the subscription video on-demand content space, is full of these images of women who are very independent and they look empowered. I would like to use the word look empowered rather than they are empowered. They look very independent, they look empowered, almost they have control over their own lives, decisions and choices, which is a bit of, which is interesting to me as a researcher, as a scholar, because if we look at the portrayal of women in the mediated space, whether that is film or television serial, historically speaking, that was very different earlier. For example, now just to make it clear at this point of time, that I will be focusing mostly on Hindi SVOD contents, because of course it's not possible to talk about all the SVOD contents that are available in India in other regional languages. The examples probably that you have already seen in the previous slide, they're all from this Hindi SVOD content. As I was saying, that earlier the depiction of women was very different in a sense that they followed more of a traditional portrayal of women. The representation of women were definitely less than the representation of men. So underrepresentation was one issue in earlier depictions. And also at the same time, their location in the narrative used to be very, very peripheral, almost at the margin. Because most of these, if we look at earlier Hindi films, you would see that mostly these films revolve around the story of the male protagonist, and women were often defined in relation to the male protagonist. So their location in the narrative was quite marginal in that sense. And their roles were pretty restricted or limited in a sense that portrayal was very much stereotypical. In a sense that either we would see them in the role of as sacrificial mother or a very dutiful daughter or wife, and an opposite end would be a very transgressive woman who would be known as the vamp, whose whole sole purpose was to distract the male protagonist and distract him from the path of virtue and so on and so forth. So that already has a very complicated history. I'm not going into this. But of course, I'll mention one thing here, that it's not that this was the only representation. Of course, there were exceptions. Many beautiful, wonderful films were made when we see that, women were presented in a more, in a different manner, in a more non-traditional manner. But largely speaking, if we talk about the traditional mainstream, then the representation was like this, which is very different now when we look at the contemporary depiction of women. And that's where I see that there is or has been a remarkable change. Now, women can be seen in major character roles or even the roles of the protagonists, and who are actually in charge of the flow of the narrative. And their depictions are also very non-traditional, not that stereotypical sacrificial mother or dutiful, so-called chaste wife. So when I looked at this actually prompted me to ask several research questions, and some of them I would like to show with you. And these are like whether SVOD platforms breaking the traditional patriarchal pattern or not. And of course, this question, whether this mediated message of empowerment conforms to the everyday reality of Indian women or not. And if SVOD platforms are circulating this image, why are they circulating this image? And of course, most importantly, if I have to do a research on this, then what could be my methodological tools? What kind of methodologies would be appropriate for that? Now, to get the answers of these questions, the first thing that I had to address is I had to go back in history and see, and I had to do a kind of a comparative analysis. And I found that the most important and significant time that I should bank on is this time of the 1990s, when Indian economy transitioned from a closed economy structure to an open market economic structure. Now, this particular economic structure and this change, which is known as the economic liberalization, that impacted different social, cultural, economic aspects. But today, I'll be just looking at the kind of changes it has brought in the representation of women in the mediated space. And we see some significant changes. For example, we see that docile, quote-unquote docile, housewife that was there prevalent earlier, pre-1990, that's been changed to a more ambitious, independent, career-oriented woman who's more a professional woman. And we get to see that image in the 1990s onwards. They're more sexually liberated, in a sense, the kind of taboos that were there earlier, now more relaxed, and we see that women are asserting their sexual desires, and so on and so forth. In fact, this 1990s space and onwards, if we look at the mediated representations, we would see that many topics that were considered taboos earlier, like, for example, same-sex relationship, or having illegitimate children, or extramarital affair, things which were not spoken earlier, now was, post-1990s, we see those topics are also very much there within the purview of the mediated representation. Another interesting aspect was this conflation of the heroine and the vamp. I already mentioned how this heroine and the vamp was very distinctly demarcated earlier, but 1990s onwards, we see that this line between the two gets blurred, and oftentimes we see that there is hardly any difference between the heroine and the vamp, which is a very interesting turn. And so many scholars then definitely ask this question, whether this stereotypical role or the traditional patriarchal structure has been shattered or not, or is it so that this tradition is perpetuated? Now, in the research, we find that actually it's not that fully the traditional patriarchal structure was shattered. Rather, we see this tradition of patriarchy also continued here. Not really that all these changes that have come been able to destroy that so-called Brahminical patriarchal structure that was there in India. Now, another thing which is very important to note when we are talking about economic liberalization is that all these changes that I have mentioned so far, they were received within a social context which is marked by the growth in technology, especially in software technology, and also the rise of new middle class. And many scholars argued that the benefits of this kind of new economic liberalization, these benefits were received mostly by the upper caste, upper class, educated, urban or semi-urban women and men, those who were there. For example, this software technology, the boom in the IT sector, created diverse job opportunities, and many educated women, Indian women, could participate in that software boom and be part of the workforce, the new workforce. But if we use the caste question, then probably we would see that this was mostly restricted to the upper caste and upper class, upper to upper middle class, and urban women who had access to social material resources more than the lower caste people. So this is another strand of the research that also can be further looked at. Now, coming back to this question of SVOD, now in our recent time, I see that these changes that already I have mentioned got far more entrenched in the SVOD space, or in the films that were made in the post-millennial time. And we see that nowadays the content, I already mentioned that the mediated contents are more female protagonist oriented, which was not so earlier times. The number of female characters also increased a lot. In the speaking roles, we see more of those female characters coming in. So the new woman who, after the liberalization, came into existence, this new woman, which I call New Woman 2.0, is a more of a reconfigured version, who is now more of a, let's say, entrepreneurial or a doer self, because the kind of characteristics, attributes that we see in this new woman is that the new woman is more enterprising. She takes the initiative. She is the active, freely choosing doer self. And Sangeeta Gopal, one scholar, mentioned that this kind of genre in this SVOD content, where we see women take or are forced to take action and thus reinvent themselves, it's known as take action genres, according to her. So, of course, these women that we see, there's another interesting attribute, that they are constantly engaged in a regime of self-reinvention. Something Rosalind Gill, in a different Western context, said that as a makeover regime. And this makeover regime or self-reinvention is not restricted to outward physical reinvention, but also the inward internal reinvention. So self is in a constant state of reinvention from both outside and inside. And this another interesting aspect that we see in this representation of Indian women in the SVOD content that as I'm talking about here, but also applicable to a great extent to post-millennial films, that they are portrayed as very sexually empowered women. And this is a problematic area because most of the time you see that this sexual empowerment is translated into their action of desiring sex in many forms, rather than talking about sexual empowerment in a more feminist, quote-unquote feminist manner. So all these changes actually make me understand that these images of empowerment of women that we see in the SVOD space contains neoliberal and post-feminist values. And therefore, I decided to use this critique of post-feminism as my methodology to understand this. Very quickly, I would like to, because there's no time, so very quickly, I will talk about theory part here, that post-feminism is a very convoluted space. We can see the usage of the term in early 20th century, but it's a very conflicted term because here we see that both the feminist ideals are incorporated and repudiated, something that Angela McRobbie calls as double entanglement. Gill and Schroff defines post-feminism as an epistemological break, as a rupture, because this prefix post often suggests a kind of opposition to Anglo-American feminism, which acquired or occupied a more dominant and hegemonic position. Susan Faludi talks about post-feminism as a backlash, whereas Rosalind Gill defines post-feminism as a sensibility which is more visible in neoliberal spaces. Now, neoliberalism and post-feminism, they share common grounds. Both actually, they strongly emphasize individualism and the individual's ability to choose, and that individual is structured or configured as a self who is an active, freely choosing self. So both again they emphasize on character disposition, in a sense that both talk about a constant monitoring of this self. That's something that I already mentioned. It's a state of self-surveillance, both internal and external surface being scrutinized, being monitored to attain a kind of a perfect self that is active and entrepreneurial. And so this both of them, I mean, both post-feminism and neoliberalism, therefore, they put the onus of the responsibility on the self. And the problem here is that in this process, they take the attention away from the structural inequities that are present in the society, because the responsibility is more on the individual subject, on the self, to take action and to change the situation. Rosalind Gill puts it in a post-feminist context in a very nice way, as she says that in post-feminist culture, sexiness is often seen as the key, if not the sole source of a woman's identity. And therefore, this whole soul, kind of initiative among women to look sexy, because that is often synonymous with being empowered. Now, there lies the whole problem, because then the whole definition of empowerment is changed and it is very much commodified in that way. So therefore, if we keep all these theoretical issues in our mind, then we'd see that the SVOD content in India is rather problematic. And we really cannot claim, or maybe we'll be hesitant to claim, that women in India, as they are portrayed in SVOD content, they are highly empowered. There are plenty of SVOD contents there, like 4 More Shots Please, Last Stories, and many are there, where we see this question of double entanglement and how they are entangled and creating problem for us. And as I mentioned, that the empowerment issue itself becomes problematized. And maybe after Andrea Cornwall, we can say these SVOD contents, they display a sort of light empowerment, means an empowerment which really does not engage with the question of material and structural inequalities that exist in the society, rather ask more to be engaged in the consumption of this neoliberal culture. So in this process, therefore, I don't think I have to explain much if I say that the feminism itself gets fetishized. It becomes a commodity to be sold in the market. And the interesting thing is that these kind of post-feminist culture, which we see through these SVOD content, they at the same time reinforce the patriarchal norms, though in a very reconfigured manner. What happens as a result is that the collective feminist struggle that is there to make some kind of substantial structural changes, they are often relegated to the periphery. However, there are exceptions. I'm not saying that there are no exceptions, but there are exceptions. Still, we see more of these contents than the exceptions. What could be the impact in a background where SVOD content is increasingly popular? Just to give you some kind of statistics, it's as it says that according to some survey, the revenue from subscription for over-the-top video platforms in India is expected to grow up to 102 billion Indian rupees by 2024. So this can give us some sort of an idea what kind of popularity is there for this, what kind of market is there for this SVOD content. And this has been possible because of the tremendous technological growth that we have seen in recent times and the digitization of the entertainment sector. And this is not just accessible to urban metropolitan audience, but also to semi-urban and in some cases the rural audience in India. Now, probably if we keep this reach and the popularity in mind, then we'll be forced, as a scholar, we'll be forced to ask this question, that what kind of repercussion, what kind of impact will be there when actually there is this escalating violence against women, and that violence against women is basically increasing in India. And when gender education is almost nil, because whatever gender education that we see that are there available in few higher education institutes, but not at the grassroots level, not at the school level, where people should be more aware of these gender norms and how this gender as a social category, how it operates. So in this kind of a context, it may be quite difficult actually to come to a conclusion and come to say that whether the empowerment, the image of empowerment or empowered women that we see in this SVOD contents, whether that is really empowering or disempowering or both. Because both we are saying, because of course there's the proliferating images of these empowered women that lends visibility to the women's issues, the so-called issues that otherwise kind of relegated to the periphery, that comes to the forefront, and that itself is quite an achievement. But the kind of message that is disseminated, the kind of skewed understanding of feminism that is disseminated, that is quite disempowering, and that may have some dangerous consequences. So just to borrow Bassett Wise's terms, that this visibility is more economics of visibility rather than politics of visibility. And also, if we just look at this question in Indian context, which is riven with different other social categories like caste, class, religion, then this question becomes even more problematic, that whose visibility that we are talking about, whose empowerment basically we are talking about. So this whole feminist idea is being appropriated, as post-feminist culture often does, that they take certain parts of the feminist ideas, feminist thoughts, and then kind of distort it, modify it according to the norms of the traditional patriarchal and neoliberal setting, by making the feminist ideal quite weaker. That I often see in these SVOD contents. And given the reach of SVOD content, I feel that it is quite a dangerous future that we are looking at. However, I'm not saying that all of them are like that, but probably we need to look at this question more deeply at a more structural level, and maybe through lectures like this, through writings, publishing, probably many other people would be inspired to talk about it. So in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to say today. Thank you for listening.
Okay, Runa, thank you so much for that. That was fantastic and very interesting. I expect we have some questions. We've got a bit of time, let's say 5 minutes or so. Sure. Anyone wants to jump in with a question, they're welcome to. Otherwise, I, of course, have one. Anyone? Yeah, okay. So I'll ask. I was really hoping you would say a bit more about double entanglement and what, not necessarily McRobbie's work there, but there seems like a two-step thing. But I was, who am I to say anything about this? But still, visibility is step one. And then what do you do with it? So I'm really interested in how popular the exemptions to the standard new woman version is. I mean, to me, that double step and the backlash perhaps seem to be something like VAMP 2.0, right? It's almost like you can be new, but you have to be new in the same old ways, right? And then, okay, that gives you some visibility. How does this connect to an emancipatory movement, women's movement, feminism, and actual changes, right? Not just representational changes. If you could say something more about how that double play works, that'd be really helpful. And then I have a question for everyone else. I mean, I only noticed this as I was looking at the PowerPoints. I think we've translated VAMP wrong. Have you understood? Ma Kong wrong, right? It's not vampire, not the person with teeth, right? It's vamp is something else. Did that come across in the translation? It's not vampire. It's more like sexy, seductive, but a bit
femme fatale, maybe.
Femme fatale rather than vampire. I think maybe the translation doesn't come across. But yeah, if you could talk about double.
Sure. Actually, this is what McRobbie's word about double entanglement, and she used it to talk about this the particular trait of post-feminism. Is it echoing or something? Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So so that's what she said, that this post-feminist culture, often what it does is that it takes away the feminist ideal, or what feminism stands for, this social, political, economic equality that feminism stands for. It takes it away and kind of makes makes the idea of feminism a kind of a fetish, a commodity, which very much commensurate with a capitalist neoliberal market dynamics. So where, as I mentioned, that feminism itself becomes a fetish, and people kind of like to take this idea. I mean, if we look at this SVOD content, we'll see that often these women that are a portrait, for example, let's say 4 more shots, please. It's a concrete example. Why I took this name, because this particular SVOD content was also nominated in 2019-20 Emmy Awards ceremony. So this has been kind of popular, and the image of empowerment that these women, it's a 4 women protagonists are there. The entire story was the whole crew mostly dominated by women, and yet we see a kind of rendition of feminism which is fetishized and more commodified, where the actual structural questions are never addressed, because that is a bit unsettling for this so-called patriarchal structure. And therefore, this is where comes this configured patriarchy, which is very much in tandem with the market dynamics, where you need women in the workforce, but definitely you cannot talk about their status as independent, agentic in the real sense of the term, as beings, but rather you kind of give them some sort of, it's kind of giving them some sort of privileges. You call them privileges, and then you say that, yeah, women are now empowered. By the way, as you said, that VAMP 2.2, I really like that idea. VAMP or femme fatale, whatever we call them, these are the adjectives given by a very much patriarchal structure, looking in relation to them. So we are not going anywhere if we say that, yes, I am empowered because now I'm vampish. So that's what exactly Gil said, that now women, in their whole regime of makeover, where they are changing both internally and externally, what happens that they are no more the object of the male gaze, which Malfi said earlier. Rather, they are subject themselves in control of their own objectification. So this objectification is not coming from outside, but from within, through this self-surveillance and monitoring regime. What women are asked to do, and women also to a great extent are participating in that regime and thinking that they're empowered, actually what they're doing, they are fulfilling the same heterosexual male fantasy. And at the same time thinking that they are in charge of themselves. So that's why it's a very volatile kind of a situation, where the whole idea of empowerment, the empowerment where we can look at the structural inequalities, and which feminism has always addressed, through collective struggles, that idea is very much relegated to the periphery.
Thank you, Dr. Runa, for your very interesting presentation. I have a question. I like your second research question. It's about the conform between the message of empowerment and the reality of Indian women. So I would like to know if you also interview some Indian women about their response to the content of the SVOD. Or you just accept everything by yourself? Thank you.
Sorry, can I?
Could you please
repeat?
I'm wondering if you also interview some Indian women about their reaction to the message of empowerment in the SVOD content.
Okay, thank you for this question. Actually, it depends on the kind of audience you are interviewing. As I said, it's very difficult to say Indian women. It's not a very homogeneous kind of community. So when we talk about Indian women, we also have to take into consideration the fact that Indian women are heterogeneously placed in the society, depending on their caste, depending on their class, depending on their religion, depending on their demographic location, that we can see that their access to the social and material and cultural resources is extremely problematic. So as I said that, I was giving an example from 4 More Shots, Please. It's mostly speaking to the urban, wealthier side of millennial Mumbai and upper caste, upper class women. And their reality definitely is very far from the reality that we see at the bottom of the society, or let's say a low caste, low class woman who is very much poverty stricken, and for whom it is difficult even to think of 2 square meals a day. So how that speaks to this? So this is a very interesting study, actually. I mean, thanks for bringing it up, that we can see how this kind of reaction may differ if we really talk about this impact of this beauty content and this attendant idea of empowerment. But maybe this idea, maybe many women would say that yes, Indian women are empowered because now they can do, let's say, express their sexual desire and so on and so forth. But what happens when it comes to sexual empowerment? The most important thing is that the women's control over their own body, women's control over their own sexual choices. Let's say a woman's decision to be a mother or not to be a mother. And even if she wants to be a mother, whether she really wants to give birth to 3 children or 2 children or 1 child, this decision, whether she is capable of taking that decision or not. So probably this idea of sexual empowerment is kind of distorted in this post-feminist culture, because that is a kind of a commodity which is sellable. And in this neoliberal market, feminism, where it becomes a fetishized commodity, it is easier to sell to people and make them, interpellate those women who can buy that commodity and that kind of product. They can be part of this whole consumption culture. So yes, it is not possible to give one single answer to the question that you asked, because it is extremely diverse and quite problematic.
Great, thank you. So Mike.
Thank you, your presentation. I would like to continue the question of the Madam Phu. I would like to hear from you your assessment in the representation on the platform, and its impact on the audience knowledge and actions there. Okay.
Probably I would like a paraphrasing of the question a bit.
Because it's known representation is a fundamental concept in the media. So I would like to hear from your assessment, your opinion about the representation on that platform and its impact on the audience.
Impact on the audience, right? Okay. So yes, SVOD platforms in India are actually growing exponentially. Almost like 40 SVOD platforms currently now operating in India's media ecosystem. And it's not only these multinational channels like companies like Netflix or Amazon Prime Video, but the regional channels, regional companies are equally powerful in India's media ecosystem. And I just gave you one particular statistics just to say that how popular it is. And many of these platforms, they offer their content through different devices, not just the usual laptop or television set, but also through mobile devices. And what we see in India, and what we have seen, that as a part of this digital India drive, we have seen a lot of new technologies have come, and these mobile phone devices have also become quite cheap and they're quite affordable, in fact. So it is not just like, for example, let's say Samsung or Apple could be, they are quite expensive. But then there are Chinese brands like Xiaomi and all, Oppo. They are very much affordable to people who are not placed in the higher, echelons of the higher stratum of the society. So this is again interesting because many of these platforms, they are given discounts if you log into them through their mobile phone devices. So this is again another incentive for people to join, to log in, to become subscribers, so that the revenue goes up. And it is actually helping a lot. I mean, many in India, at least, if we see that SVOD contents are extremely popular. And content itself, as it's been predicted by the experts, that is going to be the major driver in this boom, the SVOD boom. So content definitely, therefore, is a primary focus here. What is being sold is of extreme importance. And there comes my research, my question, that if as part of the content we are selling a very confusing idea about women's empowerment, then probably we are looking at a dangerous future. Because then what happens as part of this whole process, we are taking our attention away from the real issues which are bothering Indian women at the structural level. And we are rather, what we are doing, we are simply engaged in a cosmetic change. And we are thinking that actually empowerment has happened. And that's why there comes this relationship between the issue that I raised and the kind of popularity that SVOD platforms currently enjoy. So if SVOD platforms are so popular and reaching out to many people at the same time, and they are providing a very skewed understanding of empowerment without looking at the real problems that are plaguing Indian women at this point of time, then that is quite problematic. But I'm not saying that all SVOD platforms or all SVOD contents are like that, but majority, yes. If you look closely through a feminist lens, probably you'd understand that. Hope I answered your question. Sorry, I can't hear you. Maybe muted.
Sorry, Runa. That's going to have echo, isn't it?
I think there is. Is there any chat? I saw something. Okay. The growth of social media. Surya is from Taiwan writing, I think. The growth of social media is about content. This video, has it affected the change? Okay.
For some reason, the microphone is not working.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, there is an echo though. Right. Okay. Okay, Surya, thank you for asking this question. Well, again, it's a very double-edged in a sense that, well, to some extent, yes, the traditional ideas and social norms are changing. We can see women more in the workforce. We can see women taking decisions. And of course, at certain level, we can see some changes are there. But as I mentioned, that it is why it is double-edged, because at the same time, maybe it is beneficial to a coterie of women who come from certain backgrounds, from their caste, class background with certain privileges. But it actually, because it is not really helping the structural changes, it's not helping women in general, specifically the women who are at the bottom level, from lower caste or lower class. So these changes are, how much of these changes are affecting or changing their life for better? That is a question. And there lies this problem of post-feminism, the double entanglement, that on the one hand, it takes the feminist ideas, certain ideas from feminism, but at the same time repudiating or rejecting those ideas and instituting the traditional patriarchal norms. So we maybe at the surface level, we see certain changes, but not at a very deeper structural level. Thank you.
Great, Runa. I think I've sorted out my sound now.
Okay.
So thank you for seeing that message was in the chat.
Yeah.
So we're going to call an end to it now, but I just want to thank you so much for that presentation. There's obviously much more we could continue to discuss. I mean, I'd love to hear how this story plays out for not Hindi, you know, the new woman in, I don't know, Bengali or Malayalam, or Pakistan or Sri Lanka or even Vietnam, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Economic liberalization is part of the story of why, then we probably have a story for Vietnam. But that's for a research project for many millions of dong can be funded from the video companies, perhaps, for that. I want to thank you very much for giving the presentation. Very interesting and great, and sandwiches very well inside a set of 30-minute methods. The next one will be next month with Freya Higgins Despiola from South Australia, talking again on methods, 30-minute methods, how she does her research. I want to thank you very much for this interesting and thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And thank you, everyone, for coming in.
Okay. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. And thank you everyone else who came. See you.
Thank you for your invention. See you later.